Last week, I attended the Licensing Expo in Vegas and pitched Cowgirl Cameron to three brands, including Walmart, Jazzwares, and Educational Insights. And this video is going to tell you what I learned from that experience. So let's go. Hey y'all, it's Abriana, creator, author, illustrator of Cowgirl Cameron. Cowgirl Cameron is an edutainment brand that connects kids to agriculture early. And right now we have 3 books in the book series with a 4th one coming out in August. And so I wanted to just give a recap on the Licensing Expo, why I went, what I learned. It was 3 days of absolute pandemonium. The most fun that I have ever had at any sort of conference, expo, whatever. But I wanted to explain what it is, why I went, and some of the things that came out of that. So, the Licensing Expo is a trade show for the licensing industry, the brand licensing industry. So, for example, when you go into a store and you see, say, Hello Kitty products, it is not the creators of Hello Kitty that have made those products. Say you're wanting to have a Hello Kitty birthday party, um, and you're getting plates and cups and forks and party supplies. The creators of Hello Kitty are not making those items. It is a manufacturer who has licensed the image, the intellectual property, the IP, the brand of Hello Kitty to make those items and put them in a retail store. It's a very like basic level example. And so at this trade show, all of the key players come together to learn about new brands, learn about what brands are looking for licensing opportunities, and um then there's the professional services that are in between those negotiations between licensors, which is someone who owns a brand. So I would be a licensor. Licensees, those are the individuals that are wanting the brands. They are manufacturers, retail, like that side of things. They could be agencies and like digital creators. Um and then there are the IP attorneys that make sure that negotiations go well as far as contracts. There are licensing agents and agencies that connect brands with the manufacturers and facilitate new opportunities between the two. There's so many key players, and at this licensing expo, they all come together to figure out what's new, what's trending, and what opportunities there are in the industry in that year. And so I attended this licensing expo because in October 2023, when I was driving to Orlando to celebrate my birthday, I came across a podcast episode with April Showers of Afro Unicorn. And this podcast was Side Hustle Pro podcast with Nikayla Matthews. And April was sharing the licensing journey and what the outcome of that was and how she got to where she is today. And I realized when I had this vision of having Cowgirl Cameron products in retail, um, and people wanting dolls and wanting plushies and wanting these things, I realized there was a gap in my knowledge. I did not know how to go from where I am, to that reality. And that podcast episode opened up a completely new industry for me, and which is licensing. And so April recommended, if you wanted to get into licensing, one of the things she recommended was attending this expo. And so I knew that that was something that I needed to make happen. And that's why I attended. Even after hearing that episode, another thing that she recommended was joining the Women in Toys Licensing and Entertainment Association, which I did. And I've gotten a mentor through there. We've worked so hard and kind of refining the vision and educating me on what licensing is. Um, from that mentorship, I relaunched the website, and I have a really clear vision on the rest of the year and what I should be preparing for with this vision of licensing Cowgirl Cameron brand um, in the near future. And so being able to license the characters, the lessons, anything really, anything that I create with Cowgirl Cameron is just a different approach to not only the business model, but also how to bring it to market mass or more mass than what I got right now market, even though I love y'all. All my Barnyard besties, love y'all. Um, it's just a different approach. And it's a way to do it where I get to operate in my expertise. I get to illustrate, I get to create this world of Cowgirl Cameron, while someone else operates in their expertise. And they get to bring the products to market in a space that they know it's going to do well. So I kind of touched on who attends these things, but some of the people that I met at the Licensing Expo were brand owners. It was very important to me to meet people who were not only where I am, but also maybe a year or two ahead of where I am, because I wanted to know, what is it that I don't see? What opportunities am I not aware of? How do I go about making specific connections to minimize wasting my time? What lessons could I learn from others that I can incorporate into this journey of licensing Cowgirl Cameron? So, so yeah, met brand owners. I also met some licensing licensees who they were looking for brands. And a lot of the licensees were really looking for legacy brands. There were a couple of keynotes that I attended that kind of explain why that is happening. Um, I think there was one keynote that said that there was only in the licensing industry, as far as the age or the categorization of the brands, only 22% were new brands in 2023. So 88% of brands that influence the $356 billion industry were legacy brands. They were brands that relied on nostalgia and creating new and reinventing ways for today's consumer to engage with legacy imagery, brand, content, all of that. So knowing those things and hearing those statistics put a little bit of perspective for me, on what people are looking for now and what is going to be required to be a part of that 22%. Speaking of the keynotes, I kind of want to get into what I learned from this expo, and then I'll get into the pitch. Okay. So, um, licensing as an industry leverages emotional connection between consumers and brands through products, services, and experiences. And one of the things that I have always said, not only in my business, but like as my guiding star, is that I create experiences for people to learn about themselves and the world around them. Like that is what I want to do for work. That's what would make me feel fulfilled. And so in reading that definition, I just felt so called to, or so affirmed that I'm in the right place to do this in this particular way. There's so many different areas of licensing. You have apparel, pet products, in-person experiences like um, Walt Disney um, licenses. Well, I don't know if they own it. I don't know the details here, but this is just an example of an experience that can be licensed. Is the new um Princess and the Frog exhibit situation that's being created at Disney World, Disneyland, whichever one. Like that's like a licensed thing. They're licensing it to that in-person experience. Um there are three main ways that licensing helps businesses. It helps with the storytelling and helps to amplify the stories created around whatever character is there. It helps to increase engagement for not only the person who's licensing their IP, but for the people who are licensing from someone. They can get to explore new product categories. Like say one person is like Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart is always licensing out her identity, her persona. She got pet products. She got a whole line in PetSmart. Okay. And she's got pots and pans. So many different product categories that you can go into when you have built a platform. And then it also increases revenue for not only the licensee who is actually selling the products, but also the licensor, which there's different ways that it breaks down, but a lot of times licensors receive royalties off of the products that are sold. So those are just some of the top three ways that licensing can influence a business and influence a business model. One of the things that I learned from walking the floor is that this is truly a global process. There were so many international brands there represented. Half the people running the expo were from the UK, I think the company that hosts the licensing expo is UK based. But as someone who has created a very small grassroots brand, that hadn't even crossed my mind. Like, what would Cowgirl Cameron look like in the UK? How would she be received in the UK? What would she look like in Africa? How would the messaging be received in the countries of Africa? It's just something to think about and something that I hadn't thought about previously. One of the other things that I wanted to make sure that I learned was the industry language so that I could have an intelligent conversation with someone about what it is I was trying to achieve. And so learning the difference between a licensee and a licensor and a uh the brand IP and a licensing agent and an IP attorney, how an IP attorney is not the same as a licensing attorney, not always. I have a trademark IP attorney who has trademarked Cowgirl Cameron for me, but she's not going to be the same person that can negotiate a licensing deal on my behalf. So, understanding those key players so that I know who to look for and I know who to add to my team is just so very important to me. Um, I also was able to identify kind of what next steps look like. Um, this kind of comes from the pitch too, so I'll pause. I'll reference that in just a little bit. But I did meet um I met a brand called B Row. I don't have their stuff near me, but it's called B Row. Um Golly, I don't forgot what it stands for. But it's a giant lion with a purple mane. Okay. And it is a black owned brand who has created curriculum and really connected uh with school systems and Head Start programs to really share this like social emotional learning curriculum. And if you've been following Cowgirl Cameron for a little while, that is also the way that I am looking to go. And so I asked the owner of B Row, who has been around for at least a decade, I said, what would you tell someone like me who is just getting started in intentionally building this brand and wants to have a very similar impact? And he told me that this is something that you have to be willing to do, basically, even though you're not getting paid for it. Like, it has to be a passion so deep that you are willing to go through the hard times. Um, he says that you have to really be committed in getting yourself out there and committed to constant innovation. He said that especially in education, the key words or the key priorities change so much. So you have to always have a pulse on that, get ahead of it, and just be willing to pivot. Um, he said that back in the day, character building was the key term for what school systems were looking for. He said now it's social and emotional learning. And so he had to constantly be prepared to pivot their messaging and pivot their language and pivot the lessons so that he could remain relevant. And I just absolutely love that piece of advice. And speaking of just the priorities of the language, I learned that now there's an acronym MESH, and that stands for mental, emotional, social health. Mental, emotional, and social health. And that is basically social emotional learning. Um, but now there is that terminology. There is the acronym. Educators love a good acronym. But in my messaging and in my decks and in my pitches, using that language shows a knowledge of the industry and a knowledge of upcoming trends. And so have to be willing to pivot, have to be willing to incorporate those things. Um, I connected with some people that I had only met online, especially through the Women in Toys Association. I met some really, really dope people. I met some game developers. I met some marketing and PR professionals. And I had people who were like, I saw you on the sustainability community calls. So good to see you in real life. And it was just like, sure, thank you for recognizing me and coming up to me and saying something. Like everybody was so um just welcoming. And I'll tell you, there was only one conversation where I was like, I might need to wrap this up. But as soon as I started saying, uh, sharing more of my story, and I realized that this woman also was releasing a children's book, and then she was like, interest peaked. And so we started sharing Facebook group resources. And she was saying how she had a vanity publisher, and she was like, I don't even understand how you publish three books by yourself, because I paid a vanity publisher to do all this, and then I had to do all this work. And I'm like, exactly that. We're doing the same amount of work, yet I didn't pay anybody. So here we are. And then she opened up, and the conversation completely changed. And so it's just a reminder not to necessarily hide parts of your story, but you can connect with people because of your story, not avoiding it. And that just was proven time and time again. I will tell you, within the first hour or 30 minutes of the expo, I found a human design astrologer person. I found a horse person. I found veterinary people. I found just other Black people who were like, bro, this is my first time. And I loved it. Like all of my like intersections of interest, I found those people immediately. And I was able to connect with them over the whole 3 days, and make a friend. And you don't get that from hiding parts of who you are. Um, and then the last thing that kind of stood out to me, or that I still feel like I'm processing, but high level, I was able to see what was trending in, kind of the industry, and how brands represent themselves, what the activations look like. And so, I was having the thought like, maybe I would want to have a booth next year. What would that look like? I got my hair blingered. I don't know if you saw any of the pictures. I had little gems on my locks. That was from a booth, from a brand that is looking to get licensed. And it was blinger. And and they created a sense of FOMO, because you're walking around and you're seeing all these women with jewels in their hair. And it's like, wait a second, it's not everybody, but it's more than a handful. Where they getting jewels at? Or maybe it's just me, because I want jewels in my hair. And so I was able to find them and get all kinds of jewels in my hair that I rock for the whole rest of the conference. So just seeing how brands call people in. I also saw brands that did not call people in, and we're just sitting behind their tables waiting for someone to walk up to them. And I took note of that also, to say, ooh, that's not something that works in a trade show that is about play. You have to be attractive. And what are the things that attract people? Things that look fun, things that when they immediately look at it, they put a smile on their face. There are colors, there's movement. Whether there's movement of people or movement of a screen, there's something. There are brands that I didn't even know licensed anything. Boy Scouts of America. I got a hammock from Boy Scouts of America. Airstream. Airstream created or has some sort of licensing product with a line of teas, like tea that you drink. And they had a tea party at the Airstream booth. Yeah, like that makes sense to bring people in and to show them the opportunities, what it looks like, and how they can integrate not only what they are licensing into their own sales and whatnot, but how what is being licensed will integrate you into their brand. And I just loved taking note of that and observing that. Um, I feel like this video has gone on for long enough. So I'm going to say this is part one. Okay. This is part one of my Licensing Expo recap. In part two, I'm going to talk about Empowerment Day. And Empowerment Day is where I pitch Cowgirl Cameron to Walmart, Jazzwares, and Educational Instincts. So maybe here, wherever. Haven't been on my YouTube game for very long, but somewhere you will find Licensing Expo Part 2, The Pitch.